We're now live, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to this evening's meeting of the Waste Management Scrutiny Panel. Before we start, I'd like to make a brief announcement. So this virtual meeting is being live streamed. It will also be recorded and the recording subsequently made available via the Council's website. In addition, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or recordings is not under the Council's control. Please note that members of the public viewing the meeting via the live stream can only see the people who are speaking. Also, that it takes a second or two for Zoom to switch view to that person once they begin. Participants should please ensure that their microphone is muted when they are not speaking. So I'm just going to ask each member of the panel to confirm verbally that they're present and that they can see and hear the proceedings. So Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm present and I can hear and see the meeting.
Okay. In terms of councillor members of the panel, it's just myself and Councillor Baldwin at the moment. So I'll move on to officers. So we have Matt Bradford, Head of Cleansing and Open Spaces.
Thanks, Chair. I can see and hear proceedings.
Thank you, Matt. We have Sally Watson from Democratic Services.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see the meeting.
Sally, and we have Laura Strong, also from Democratic Services.
Thank you, Chair. I can also see and hear the meeting.
Laura, and we have Jim McGovern from Serco.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the meeting also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So moving on to item 1 then, which is apologies. We've received, I understand, apologies from Councillor Julian Howe. And also from Councillor Lee Harper-Davies, the Cabinet Lead Member for Community Support and Equalities. We've received apologies also from Councillor Needham and I believe from Councillor Parton.
Yes, Councillor Parton. I've just picked up a late apology from Councillor Parton, Chair. So the only member of the panel that we haven't got here that I was expecting is Councillor Forrest. So perhaps she'll arrive shortly.
Okay, so moving on to item 2 then, which is disclosures of pecuniary and personal interests. Do any members have any to declare? No? Okay. Item 3 is declarations of the party whip. None to declare. Okay. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 31st of March. The minutes of that meeting have been circulated. Does anybody have any issues to raise with those minutes? No. Councillor Baldwin, are you happy to approve those minutes? You're on mute, Paul.
I'm happy to approve the minutes, Chair.
Okay, me too. So we can take the minutes as approved. Item 5 is questions under Scrutiny Committee Procedure 11.16. No questions have been submitted. So I think we can move straight on to item 6 on the agenda, which is identifying barriers and looking at ways to overcome them in terms of recycling. And we were due to have Jenny Ardley from Loughborough University, but she's also sent her apologies for this evening. So I think, Jim, probably if you're happy, we can move straight on to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've been asked to substitute for Joanne Mortimer, who's the contract manager for Serco at the Charnwood contract. I understand that we're looking at options to try and alleviate the barriers that are in place at the moment with the current contract on recycling to improve the rates. I had a quick chat with Matt earlier in the week. I thought, first of all, it might be interesting for members to understand there are the usual rounds that do cause us a little bit of concern when the loads are ejected at the recycling plant at Casepack, it's a processing plant. So everything that the good residents of Charnwood put into the green bins, it then gets taken to a material sorting facility at Casepack. We've got all our rounds, we've got 14 mainline rounds, and 3 of them are in certain areas on a Thursday in Loughborough. They're the ones where we have the highest of the contamination rates. The difficulty we have is, of course, the guys that are on the ground, the refuse loaders, they'll do a quick cursory inspection of residents' green bins. They're not allowed to obviously sift through the bins for obvious reasons with health and safety in mind. But if they do see anything that appears to be a contaminant, so then that particular bin is left, it's rejected with a rejection hanger to inform the customer the reasons why the bins had to be left. However, there is an option, I suppose, for those residents who are a bit more astute that want to get rid of as much waste as they can, that they might layer non-recyclables a bit further down the bin that are not visible until it's actually tipped off at the recycling plant. The difficulty of that is, of course, when we get there, there's about 9 to 9.5 tons of material in each of the loads, and it only needs to have a certain percentage before the contractors at Casepack deem that as unsuitable and they will reject the load. And that's unfortunate because the good residents have managed to recycle correctly. We've lost their recyclable materials as well as the contaminants. But then the authority, Charnwood, I mean, they would have to pick up the tab for that waste to actually then get disposed of it, excuse me, at landfill. So it's an unfortunate situation all round when that happens. So maybe we need to concentrate on those areas that give us the most concern to start off with, to see if there's anything there we could do to improve the service for those that don't appear to recycle correctly, but also let's not punish those that do want to do it right in the first place. Options for trying that. I mean, some of those areas in Loughborough, they're what we call communal areas. So those with flats and multiple occupancy. And of course, they're very difficult to control when, if you've got your own individual bin on your own household, you know what's going into that bin, but it's very difficult if it's in a communal area. So maybe we could perhaps work with Charnwood's officers to see if there's those areas that we can come up with some ideas as to how we can improve the rates but reduce the amount of contaminants that are going into the bins. It is an educational process. One would hope that customers do want to recycle as much as they can for future generations and looking after the current planet. But we're open to all thoughts and ideas. But from an operational point of view, we've got some good guys that work for us and gals. We have got some females, which is good in the service, and they do concentrate. If they do see something that's not recyclable, then we will reject that material at source rather than put it into the back of the truck. But we're open to the sort of honesty, if you like, of residents to recycle properly. And it's a difficult task. But yeah, we're all open to ideas. I know that Casepack themselves, I know that they do have a video of the recycling plant. I don't know if that's something, whether the council have had it before on the council's website, and maybe a link for customers whenever they contact the council, that they get supplied with a link to show customers what actually happens to the material that they separate out of the normal waste stream. It might give them an idea as to what is acceptable and what isn't deemed recyclable. And things do change over the last 3 or 4 years or so. At one time, residents were able to put anything in the green bin, even if it was in a black plastic sack. But of course, black plastics, for operational reasons at Casepack's plant, then they're not acceptable now. Anything to do with black plastic is not acceptable. And of course, we're trying to change people's attitude and give them a bit more of a conscience on recycling. I know you said there was going to be somebody from the university. We probably need to do some more work with the university, because they have a lot of students that live off campus. They're living in rented accommodation. in those particular areas that I've highlighted where there are high contamination rates. So maybe we should target those 3 rounds to start off with, just to see if we can see some improvement there. I don't know if anybody wants to question anything, or if they've got anything that they might think I might need to provide some answers for.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Baldwin, do you have any questions? Or you're on mute.
It's probably down to Matt, but I was wondering what the percentage of loads that have been rejected are.
Matt has his hand up. I'm wondering whether he's primed to offer this information.
It wasn't to answer that question. I think getting the whole load rejected at CasePack is quite rare. So we tend to go through quite a long time without having any, and then we can all of a sudden get 2 or 3 at once. So, you know, I don't think we've had any rejected loads in the last 12 months, completely rejected, where the whole sort of, as Jim's explained, the whole 9 tons gets put to one side and taken to be incinerated. But what they do more frequently is, once the 9 tons of recycling is tipped on the floor, if there's an area that they can isolate of contamination, they will separate that off and reject part of the load rather than the whole load, and that tends to happen more often. I'd say it's still quite rare for it to happen, but it does happen. And when, as Jim's quite rightly pointed out, when it does happen, you lose 9 tons of material, and all the material that we collected from the households that observe the recycling rules that we've got, unfortunately goes to landfill, and it's not recycled. So it's not frequent. I was actually going to ask Jim whether the rounds that we're talking about are round 1, 5, and 6 on a Thursday, whether those are areas of particular focus, because I think that's an area where we've had whole loads rejected in the past, and I could get some maps on the screen if that was the case, Jim, to show where those areas were. Hopefully, if we put them on the screen, we'd be able to see them adequately. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Jim, are you able to confirm, is it those rounds that you're talking about?
It is, yeah. Matt's correct in all ports here. It's round 1, 5, and 6 on a Thursday. I have got the listings, the street listing, fortunately, because I'm just using my iPhone at the moment and not able to do it on a laptop. Yeah, Matt's got the maps there, and that's the ones that we would show. So that would indicate the areas that we would be looking at.
So this is Thursday, round 1. So Meadow Avenue, Bottleacre Lane, Brush Drive, Gordon Road, Thomas Cook Place, Burder Street, Ratcliffe Road, Glebe Street, I think that's Nottingham Road there, Clarence Street and Duke Street is round 1. And then I'm hoping this will be different. This is round 6, which is, can you, I'm not sure whether this is coming over clear on the screen, unfortunately, but Ashby Road, Westfield Drive, Radmore Road, York Street, William Street, Burfield Avenue, Frederick Street, Arthur Street, Curzon Street, Heathcote, Broad Street, Hastings, Regent Street, Oxford Street, Leopold Street, Paget Street, Station Street area. And then I just need to find 5 now, which I'm hoping will be this one. Yes. This is round 5, and the areas highlighted there. We have Queens Road, Berryman, Hartington, Queens Road, Boyer Street, Freehold Street, Peel Drive, Russell Street, Moore Lane, Wellington Street, Moira Street, Gregory, Factory Street, New King Street, Warncliffe, Bentley Close, and Warner Place are the areas that we've identified. It might help, Chair, if I circulate the maps after the meeting with the highlighted parts on, so that you can have a look in more detail.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think looking at it, from what I can gather, 2 of those areas are largely residential with a significant number of flats, and one of them is largely HMOs. That's about right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So really we need to think about, we've got 2 distinct barriers, flats and communal bin stores, and HMOs with sort of, 4 or 5 individuals sharing a limited number of bins. And I mean, round 5, which is that sort of golden triangle HMO heavy area, they're all terraces as well. So they're all quite close together, and the bins are sort of on the pavement. And okay, I wonder if I can ask Jim, have you spoken directly to any of the operatives that work on those specific rounds about whether or not they have any suggestions for ways we can approach the problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the things that the bins are actually being rejected for as well. We do have quite a large number of food waste going into those bins. Takeaway food in particular, with they've still got food, clinging onto the pizza boxes and the takeaway food, etc., things like that, and also nappies, disposable nappies. That is a concern, and I'm just wondering whether folks, when they do buy nappies, is because it's got the recycling logo on the boxes or on the packets, they believe that the nap is recyclable. Well, not once it's been used, it won't be. It's a difficult one on that one, but they're the type of things. But yeah, the guys are very vigilant. As I say, the last thing they want to do is to reject a bin for trivial reasons. But all that information, I don't know if Matt's let members be aware. I'm sure he has, that all of the vehicles now have the in-cab technology. So anything that's rejected, it will actually give the individual address and why, the reason why that bin's been rejected and for what contamination it's been rejected for. And that's a live recording, rather than in the past where we've had sheets and sheets of paper that come into the depot at the end of the day. We've actually got it a live stream on the in-cab technology, whereby if a resident rings in half an hour after the bin's been rejected, they can actually be contacted straight away with the reason why the bin's not been suitable to be emptied on that occasion. Maybe when we do reject bins and residents do make contact, perhaps that's the time when we can, if you like, encourage them, let them know the reason why it's been rejected, and encourage them to perhaps recycle, a bit better.
I take it that residents aren't made aware during the collection itself. The bin is just left and it's recorded on the in-cab technology.
The bins have to be presented to the boundary. I mean, it is the policy is a boundary collection. When, unless the resident's actually on the front of the premises, the bin's been not emptied, it's very difficult.
I can understand as well that that they're they've got their round that they need to complete, and if they have to stop and sort of discuss with residents why the bin's been rejected, it can. I'm sure it can lead to heated arguments and delay the round. Well,
we discourage any heated arguments. I mean, the policy is that if a resident is let's say a bit angry and what have you, don't get into any confrontation with the resident. Just let them know here's a telephone number to call, or if it does get really heated, is to give the manager, myself, or one of the supervisors a call, rather than get into a face-to-face or a discussion out on the street. Nobody wants that.
So Jim, do you have any sort of suggestions for the ways that we can sort of address this beyond sort of when residents are contacted and it has to explain to them why the bin's been rejected, sort of go through what can go in the bin and what can't go in the bin. You suggested putting a video of the recycling plant up, I think, and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether, I'm sure that Casepack do have a video, or there's a link probably on YouTube that shows their operation at Casepack. There's probably a lot of things that we could probably think of by trying to encourage. I mean, what we would like is residents put all the items into the recycling bin loose, rather than bag them up in supermarket carry bags, because if they're not able to puncture the bags or anything, they're going to get less in the bin, because it's the volume then is full of air rather than products.
Do you find that that's something else that happens, particularly on these rounds?
It can be, as I say, if there's black sacks there, then that's the reason why the bin would be rejected, because there's no black plastic acceptable at the processing plant. The encouragement, really, like I say, is to try and get residents to put individual items into the recycling bin. I think I don't know if it's RAP or one of the or Tidy Britain Group. I think they're suggesting that people should have a container in the bathrooms, because there's a lot of bathroom products that might get thrown out rather than put in the green bin. If shampoo bottles, makeup, toothpaste, that type of stuff, if it's washed out, then they're acceptable. Could be an option to encourage. I think if there's more products that could be recycled, rather than a restriction, that might benefit. But I think that's a conversation outside of this meeting between the council and the processors.
Well, we have talked about the fact that we're quite lucky in Charnwood, because Casepack is able to recycle quite a wide range of packaging compared to some sort of processing plants in other local authorities. But yeah. I did wonder, and a couple of the other members on the panel did wonder, whether residents are really aware of how wide that range is, because often on the packaging itself as well, it will say this is not currently recycled, for items that actually we can recycle in Charnwood.
There is a big guide, there is a booklet that between all of us that we produce, and maybe we probably need to revisit that, because I know at one time we were able to accept household batteries, but we're no longer able to accept batteries. So maybe we need to refresh the booklet a bit further and go for another distribution of that. The booklet,
or perhaps something even simpler, maybe just like a poster that you could sort of put on your fridge in the kitchen, so you've got it near the bin.
Yeah.
Something like that, maybe.
Yeah, sure. As I say, it's I could have a look at.
I know Matt, last week, I see Councillor Baldwin has his hand up as well. I know Matt at the last meeting was talking about work that's being done with the university regarding student waste. I don't know, Matt, you want to revisit that for a moment, because it's coming up to that time of year again, isn't it?
Yeah, we're getting to that time of year where it's the end of the summer term, and the students, a lot of the students go home and change property, and they are looking to dispose of a lot of items at the same time. So every year we look to manage that with Jim and his staff, and we have got a programme of events lined up this year with the university, and I'd hope to that Jenny would go through that and highlight that, because we are working closely with Jenny and the university on delivering that programme. I think it's fair to say it's been difficult the last 2 years to deliver the end of summer term waste operations, because I think everybody's focus has been on business continuity, to provide the standard service and make sure that that rolls out normally. But we have got a series of events and actions with the university that we're going through. We have clothing bring sites, we have some furniture and reuse that we're working with the university on. And we are encouraging landlords to take up our bulky waste service if they have any large items that they want to get rid of at the end of term, to sign up for our bulky waste service, and we can do that. Yeah, there's quite an extensive program this year to work with the students. That is a once a year operation that we work quite closely with Serco on, and our street management colleagues on the enforcement side. But I think this contamination is probably a year-round issue that we need to resolve on the regular collections to stop the bins being contaminated, really, and we've got that risk of losing material through contaminated loads or partly contaminated loads.
Okay, so I think Jenny hopefully is either going to attend the next meeting or submit sort of a written submission to the panel around those issues. But would it be fair to say that now that we've identified those 3 particularly problematic rounds, that sort of we focus on sort of those and what we can do there in terms of sort of education of residents of what goes in the bin? It would be interesting to monitor sort of the contamination levels before and after we do some kind of education initiative, wouldn't it? Just to see if there's been an impact.
Yeah, we could do a controlled trial on certain areas, I guess. For our purposes, it'd be a lot easier to do that on a complete round rather than individual street level, because we can only get weight data on complete rounds. So to do a sort of before and after comparison, we'd have to look at what we did on that round on that particular day as a whole. So we could look to do that, identify a round, get a picture of what happened before, put some interventions in place, and then see what happened afterwards.
Okay. Well, speaking of weights and things of rounds, I think, Matt, you have some information to present, don't you, on the rejected loads and breakdown of materials. I know Jim's already been through that a little bit.
Yeah, just bear with me a second. The rejected load information that I have really corroborates the information that Jim's outlined from the areas that we've outlined. That those areas are the ones where we get, I think we've had the most contaminated loads identified. What I have here, if I can share my screen again, Chair, is this is our breakdown. Can you see that at the moment? This is our material breakdown for the first 3 months of 2022. I don't have the most up-to-date one yet, but it's relatively recent. So you've got 3 months there, and this gives you a percentage of the load. I should explain a little bit about how this is calculated before we go through it. So what happens periodically is that Case Pack have to do an assessment on the material that we're taking in. So they'll stop their plant, they'll select one of our vehicles that go in, isolate that recycling, run all of that load through the plant in isolation from all the other material, and they come up with an assessment on the basket of materials that they're getting. And some of those materials will be target materials, and some will be non-target materials. That's all weighed, and then we come up with this composition analysis that we've got here. So this is a composition of recycling that we've got. It's done month by month. So the first 3 items is news and pamphlets, cardboard and mixed paper. which is probably about 40% there that you can see by weight. And then we have Tetra Pak, which is a small amount, but it's a light material. PET, which is plastic. HDPE, which is another type of plastic. And then we have mixed plastics, which is about 4 or 5%. Ferrous cans, non-ferrous cans. And then we have glass, which is another large component because it weighs quite a lot, as you would expect. So that's about 30% of total. Then we have film, film clear, light ferrous scrap, fines, which is the light material you can't really identify. And then we have something called residue. So residue is a term that CasePack used to describe contamination or non-target materials that we've got. So the percentages that you see are the percentage of the whole load and not a percentage of the contamination. So you have to put this into context of the whole load that we've taken in. So residual contamination figure is hovering at around 12% on each of those 3 months. And then you can see the items here listed. So textiles is one, and a black packaging that Jim's already talked about, liquid filled bottles, batteries, which is small electrical items, miscellaneous metals, food waste, you can see there is quite high. So, 2.5% of the overall load is food waste, wood, nappies, and we've got other clinical waste, organic waste, hazardous items is none, rope and string, CDs and DVDs. FCO is furniture, ceramics, or ornaments, I think the O stands for, toys, and miscellaneous residue. So those are sort of items, I guess, that they haven't been able to identify what it is really, but it's not part of our recycling scheme. So this really tells us that for those 3 months that food is by far our biggest contaminant during that 3-month period. Probably followed by liquid filled bottles, I think, looking at that. So they're the items that are identifiable that have been found in our recycling that we don't want there for those 3 months.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So yeah, it's clear to see which ones you're finding the most of. So like Jim said, food waste still attached to particularly takeaway containers, probably bottles with liquid in, nappies. I think that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah, about 5 years ago, Chair, we did sticker the recycling bins to say no food, no nappies, no textiles. They were our 3 big contaminants at that time in 2017, and we did a recycle right campaign. So that was on social media, posters, and we did various things to try and eliminate those the highest, the main offenders really on the contamination. And I have to say it did have some short-term impact, but longer term, it's quite hard to sustain that. What I find is unless you do this education, unless you do it permanently and consistently, the messages have a short-term impact, but it's harder to get the longer-term results that you really want.
Yeah, one would hope that it was kind of common sense, but it does seem that we have to keep repeating the messages, doesn't it? Because I know at the moment we're seeing more littering as well as more contamination of recycling bins. And again, it's repeating the same messages. Councillor Baldwin had his hand up at one point.
Yeah, I was wondering how we treat things like used cooking oil. You know, olive oil bottles that may have some olive oil left in, or whatever form of oil you use to cook. How do we treat that? Is that just rejected, or what?
Yes, that would be. I would guess that would be liquid filled bottles, and then that would be separated from the other recycling as part of the sorting process, and then it would go for incineration.
Could we not? I mean, is it impossible just to run them through with water and throw them out empty, or does that not work?
It's the sheer volume of the materials, Councillor
Right.
Baldwin. I'm arranging a trip to Casepack for members of the panel to go and actually see how it works. And these plants are dealing with hundreds and hundreds of tons of material all the time that goes through, and for the most part, it's automated as well. It's actually quite impressive when you see the automation that's involved. There are some manual elements, but it would be difficult to sort of get these liquid filled bottles and empty them as well. There's another concern in that the liquid that's inside the bottles might not necessarily be what's on the label.
Yeah.
So you could be dealing with hazardous waste, and that then becomes quite difficult as well. So people store white spirit or types of acid or things in drinks containers and things like that, and if that gets into the plant, and then you've got handling issues and all sorts. So I would say that it'd be quite difficult to do that.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Okay, so do you have any other information to present, Matt, or is
that's it on the composition of our waste and our contamination and our sort of our main offenders,
okay,
if you like. If we were doing a campaign, I would say that we could break down what our main offenders are. It's clear at the moment that it's food waste, so we could target a particular material and see if we can make some positive interventions.
It's going to be different sort of offending contaminants on those different 3 rounds as well, isn't it? I imagine, based on the demographics of those areas. I doubt there's going to be much contamination from nappies in round 5, whereas there might be in round 1 and 6, for example. So it might be.
Yeah, the difficulty we have, Chair, is the way I understand that these assessments are carried out is that they pick a sort of random vehicle every month to do this. They do interim assessments, but every month they should sort of close the line down, just do 1 load, and they choose a vehicle at random to do that. And I guess it's hard to. We don't necessarily know which round this has come from to the analysis that has been done. So it's hard to say. But I would guess that the contamination varies between areas depending on the demographics and the client groupings that you've got in there. So yes, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't take it wouldn't be a big leap of faith to say that food waste would be more of an issue in the student areas than nappies and vice versa for other parts of the borough.
Okay, so at this point then, we have set up an extra meeting for the panel, which will happen in June, I think. so that we can complete this key task, because we needed to wait to have access to the collection round data. And also I think Matt is going to be sort of visiting the Housing Management Advisory Board to talk to tenants about what they perceive to be the barriers to increasing the recycling rates. So this particular key task of engagement will be completed at the next meeting when we've got access to that additional information. So to sum up this point on the agenda, item 6, Laura, could you just recap any recommendations that you've recorded during this discussion so that we can confirm them?
I think I would have to go through my notes and just highlight them to make sure that we'd picked them out. There was quite a lot of discussion about making sure the education campaign focused on the key contaminants. That was the main one that I picked out from the discussion.
Okay, and it was looking specifically at those rounds that both Matt and Jim had identified.
Yeah, focused that they were the rounds that you needed to focus that education on, and then the contaminants that were the focus. But I'll pick out in the minutes anything that that was brought out of the discussion.
Okay, so as there's only two of us here, Councillor Baldwin, are you happy with those recommendations?
Yes, I'm happy with the recommendations, Chair.
I am also happy with the recommendations. So I'd just like to thank Jim for coming along and sharing his input with us. We're going to move on to the next item, which you're welcome to stay for, Jim, but you're also free to leave if you wish to.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I appreciate the opportunity to join and give a commitment. Obviously, if Serco do come across anything else or any positive suggestions, then make sure that we feed that back through Matt and his team.
Thank you. And thank you very much for attending.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so moving on then to item 7 on the agenda. We're just going to look at completing the scrutiny scope document and final panel meeting. So the next meeting is now scheduled for the 20th of June at 6 p.m. and that's no longer the final meeting because we've had to put in an extra meeting so that we can present that information that I've just outlined. So the final meeting will now be on the 27th of July at 6 p.m. So Councillor Baldwin, are you happy?
Yep, I'm happy, Chair.
Okay. Okay, in that case, in terms of outcomes of the meeting, I think we've come up with some recommendations based on Jim and Matt's data about problematic rounds and common contaminants. And at the next meeting, we'll hopefully hear from Jenny Ardley from Loughborough University. And we'll hear from Matt about the outcome of his discussion with the Housing Management Advisory Board, and also get the information on the collection round data. And that should complete the engagement phase. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so at that point, the only thing that remains is for me to thank everybody who's participated and close the meeting. So thank you.